here. Da-da-da. All right, and well, I guess we'll start in a second. Let me just play some music, and we'll get started.
Lord. Okay. What did I miss? Because once again, I left.
Not much. We were
Me
just
marcho y yo sé perder. Ay, cómo me duele. Ay, cómo me duele.
All right. Welcome, everybody. That was Raquel Bustamante doing an homenaje or a coverage for Selena. Como me duele. Welcome today. We have Favor and Juliette. What up, Favor? What up, Juliette? How y'all doing?
hello.
I'm good.
All right. Well, glad. Thank you all for coming, for being here. And man, before hitting live, we were talking about the Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And actually, that was actually the warm-up question. So we were already talking about it. But with Juliette, you're gonna watch it right after, right? You're gonna watch it tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna find it legally. I'm just
Man,
kidding.
we got you. We got you. We'll send you the link. We'll
Okay.
shares.
All right, but yeah, I'm gonna try to watch it. If I forget, I'm just about to watch it tomorrow.
Sounds good. Well, Favor, you and I already were talking deeply about like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but if you had to like sum it up in one sentence, how would you? I don't know. What's your take on it?
Wow. Okay. The first episode was personally heartbreaking. For both characters to see them. Well, they were like apart right now, and Sam's family is going through a lot, and Bucky doesn't have any family. I mean, my boy's sleeping on the floor. He's having PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks. He's going to therapy, but there's like some good. He's getting pardoned by the U.S. government, so a lot of people thought that he was still going to be a fugitive, but he's not. He's good, but the first episode was pretty sad actually.
Yeah, and I think that there's still. Well, I don't know. Hopefully, they bring some healing, some closure. 'Cause, I mean, they still have a lot of episodes, but I agree.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes next and how they tie everything together.
Yeah, I also agree. And the other thing that I actually really like the most too, it's because I, something that every time I'm always watching movies, that's one thing that my brain always notices that like actually in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the representation of like diversity in the show, it's pretty dope. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to give it away because Juliet still needs to go see it, but then like when they try to set them up on a date and whatnot.
That was so cute. But it was kind of sad how like they don't know anything about him. So when he goes, I'm 106, she's like, haha, you're joking. He's like, haha, no, I'm not.
Right, and out of all the places to pick well, I guess she had gotten out of work and whatnot, but
Yeah, I actually kind of like it, the playing games and all that. Did you notice she goes, wow, you drink a lot? That's because of the super soldier serum. He can't get drunk.
I
I just
didn't.
I love the tying it together. And in Captain America: The First Avenger, Steve can't get drunk anymore because of the super soldier serum. So Obviously, Bucky
He's just-
can't either because he got it too.
I did not notice. See, I'm telling you, these are like the little things that I did not notice. It just went over my head. So now I feel like I'm gonna have to go back and watch it.
Yeah, I watch all of them.
Yeah. I also did watch the Justice League, but we'll leave that one for another day for folks. Y'all should go check. It's 4 hours long, but it was really good. That's all I got to say about that one. But anywho, let me turn it over to you so you can give us our Melanin March facts and educate us a little bit more.
All right. The person I am highlighting today kind of hits differently for me. Um, her name was Sarah Forbes Bonetta. She was born in 1843 as Omaba Aina, a Yoruba princess from the Great Oyo Empire, which is modern day Nigeria. She was orphaned during the war with the Dahomey Kingdom, which is modern day Benin, and at the age of 5, she ended up in the king's court as a slave. 2 years later, Captain Frederick E. Forbes of the Royal Navy arrived at the Kingdom of Dahomey on a diplomatic mission to negotiate an end to Dahomey's involvement in the Atlantic slave trade. The king refused and offered Aina as a gift to Captain Forbes. Out of moral concern for her safety, Captain Forbes accepted on behalf of Queen Victoria and returned to Britain. Forbes renamed Sarah, or he renamed her Sarah Forbes Bonetta after his ship, and in 1850 she met the Queen, who was impressed with her intelligence. They actually remarked that she was more intelligent than all of her white counterparts, and like they were really impressed of how smart she was. The Queen raised Aina as her goddaughter in the British middle class. At age 8, she got sick from Britain's climate and was sent to school in Sierra Leone. In 1862, she got married to Captain James Davies, a Yoruba businessman. They moved back to Africa and had 3 children. The first of them, Victoria Davies, was named after the queen and also raised as her goddaughter. Aina maintained a good relationship with the queen to the point where her and Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther were the only legas indignes in the Royal Navy that had the orders that the Royal Navy had to evacuate in an event of an up. So there's a lot of things that we could discuss about that, and that would take a whole nother podcast. But it's just it's an interesting story, and I hate the fact that she's forgotten by history. But I can also say that it rubs me the wrong way how like people praise like the queen for taking her in, and it's like that white savior complex again. And I feel like there's a different story behind it. I don't think that they just like took her back and just like, yeah, we just care about her, and I'll just raise her as my own. But there's a lot of things surrounding that. So
Yeah, I agree. And then like what you were saying about like that she was impressed of her intelligence. So it's like, well, during that time period, there was like that misconception that like, and created by white folks and created by the Eurocentric ideology that like, black folks and people of color were subordinates to white
right,
folks,
right.
so it's, I don't know. That's just like my little input on that, but thank you.
Mhm.
That's pretty dope. Thank you
Yep.
for bringing it up, and also like, continuing that, women's history as well, Women's History Month, and, Black History Month, intertwining and mixing it both.
Yes.
Um, the person that I'm highlighting today is Grace Lee Boggs, and Grace Lee Boggs is also another person that, because I brought in Grace Lee Boggs in my classroom this past week, and I asked my students like if they knew who she was, and sadly, like nobody knew who she was. So I was like, man, like what? So again, like the things that you're bringing in, the things that I bring in, it just reminds me of how much the American education system needs like a little update, a little upgrade to include, people like that we talk about. Grace Lee Boggs, she was a Chinese American author, philosopher, activist. She also was part of like the Civil Rights March. So she was like marching. She went to go see Dr. King give his "I Have a Dream" speech. She moved to Chicago because she had a trouble, getting a job as a woman and as a Chinese woman. So she was there in the, for lack of better terms, in the trenches, fighting for the rights of not only African Americans, but that's also one of the things that I also like to tell people and to remind folks. It's like if we get behind our Black brothers and sisters or our Black community, it's kind of like a trickle down. It's like if we can fight for the rights of the most marginalized people, then that in turn would also get the equality for all other people from what we call minority groups here in the United States. So just definitely wanted to highlight Grace Lee Boggs. And I'm gonna play this quick little video, and then after we come back from the video, that's what we'll jump into our discussion today. The topic is the double consciousness, or having if y'all don't know what that is, I'll explain it a little bit further. But for folks of color, when we talk about the double consciousness, it's also another word, maybe code switching. That's also, maybe it's not synonymous, but in that term. So that's what we're going to be talking about today: the double consciousness, the code switchings, and kind of like traversing various white spaces. So before we do that, let's watch this video on Grace Lee Boggs.
I was born in 1915 above my father's Chinese restaurant. And I knew very early that changes were needed in this world because the waiters in the restaurant used to say when I cried, "Leave her on the hillside to die, she's only a girl baby." I did not become a movement activist until I was in my mid-20s. I was working for $10 a week in the philosophy library of the University of Chicago, because in those days, even department stores would come right out and say, "We don't hire Orientals." That led me to involvement in the March on Washington movement led by A. Philip Randall, which was mobilizing tens of thousands of African Americans to march on Washington to demand of jobs in the defense plants, and has been a wonderful life, recognizing how important it is to maintain a vision of the future and to have an idea of revolution that is not so much seizure of power, but changing ourselves to become the change that we want to see in the world. To create programs and to say things that encourage those people who want to do something to become leaders is a fantastically rewarding and challenging opportunity.
All right, so that's just a little video on Grace Lee Boggs, and I also wanted to make sure I highlighted her. And at least in my classroom in our school, we spent a lot of time talking about the incidents that happened on Thursday with the shootings in Atlanta. So, one of the things that not only did we discuss the events and kind of what that means and the impact on the Asian community, but I also try to make sure to like talk about the positive things that the Asian communities from different Asian communities, what they've also contributed to the United States as well. So Grace Lee Boggs was kind of like the first person that I introduced in the classroom before we started talking about those events. So big shout out, and we are in support of our Asian community, the Asian community in the United States, especially with what they're going to, and the spike in racism of in the United States, especially with COVID. At least, in my classroom, I always try to tell our students, We got to support not the Black community, the Asian community. We must support all marginalized groups, and we must also learn about the history of the marginalized groups in the United States. Okay, so I'm going to switch over. Oops, sorry about that. Today we are going to be talking about the double consciousness. And just to give you all a little brief background of that term, the term was coined by W.E.B. Du Bois, famous, full name William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. He wrote the paper, The Souls of Black Folks, in which he talks about, and this is a quote that's pulled out, it's a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. So essentially, it's the internal conflict experienced by people who have been conquered or marginalized in an oppressive society, and always having to try to measure your success to their standards. And also, like when you're going to different spaces, having to switch to meet or to make them feel comfortable. And by them, we mean white folks. So this is what the conversation that we are going to have today. And I guess I'll toss it over to you all, but and I know, so I guess the question is, what do you all, when we talk about double consciousness, what are some of the spaces that where you all have had to switch who you are just to not to fit the mold, but like when you, what are the spaces that you feel that you always have to switch who you are and kind of like tone yourself down, if that question makes any sense? Favor, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah. Most situations, I think. Um, I actually caught myself the other day. I realized that I don't do it consciously anymore. School, work, anywhere that has people that don't look like me, I automatically switch. And then again, culture wise, even in the midst of people who do look like me, when I'm around Nigerians, I switch. When I'm not around Nigerians, I switch. So I don't even know who my default self is, but I switch a lot. It goes around, it comes around. I have a lot of different accents or terminologies and words that I use, so I don't even know how I actually relate with people, but it depends on who you are, basically.
Thank you. Let's see, Juliette, what about you?
Um, I think mainly I do it if I'm calling some type of business, or I well well, actually, when I would apply for a job, I would call them, or when I was calling the place to ask questions about hiring, I would switch. And even at my actual job, I would switch too. School, not it wasn't as much, unless I was around somebody I didn't really know, or a teacher I wasn't really that comfortable with, then I would do it then. Um, I can't really think of anything else, because out in public I don't do it too much.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. And that's one of the things that's like, I think when you all said that, well, even also Favor, like in school, or like when you're a teacher that you don't know, I think that's kind of like where I see it. And even myself too, like when I'm teaching, even now, right? Like the way I'm speaking, it's, you have to switch, you have to code switch. I don't even know how to explain it why, but it's more of like, because sometimes you could be judged or you could be looked differently just on how you speak, or what, what you're saying. If that, I don't know, it just, that idea or that feeling that like, oh, I don't want to be looked less down upon, or I don't want to be looked down upon for speaking a certain way or acting a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talked about like different, changing who you are, code switching into different groups, like when you were in different groups, has there ever, or for both of you, has there ever been a time where that comes in conflict? Like, for example, there's been, you know, me originally growing up in California and Los Angeles, and then growing up and speaking, having a different lingo, and then coming to Wisconsin, I had to switch my whole vernacular. And then sometimes when I go back, it's, your friends, you can like, who are you? It's like when you have both worlds mixing and then you're like, who are you? Like, oh, you're fake or something like that. It's like, it's kind of complicated, but have y'all ever had that happen?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do you deal with it?
Um I have to I don't really know, but I have to like switch more consciously, I guess, because I already switch unconsciously, but like when I'm around certain people, I have to like remember, I guess. It is kind of hard and it does kind of cause a conflict, but I think over the years it's gotten a little better.
What about you, Julia? Has there ever been a time where in a space where you've been caught with like or in a position where you feel like your identities have been in conflict with each other?
There, I remember this specifically. It was when I was trying to ask questions about a job, and I was doing fine, and then he hung up on me the first time. So then I'm like, oh, okay. And then I called her back. And then I'm like, now should I do the same thing, or like should I just, so I was just kind of debating on that, and I ended up just trying to be the most respectful I could because she hung up on me when I had a genuine question. Um, it didn't work too well, but I guess in that case,
Wait, so like did you say the questions differently the first, or like can you explain a little bit further?
I just asked the first time. I was like, "Hi, I'm wondering about job positions, and if you may not know, then could I like speak to someone in management or of higher management, or could you direct me to a line to where they could help me?" And then she just hung up. So I was like, "This is the second time I'm calling. I have questions about the job. Could you direct me to somebody who is of higher management, or could you tell me yourself if you have any places here that could hire me?"
Okay.
It wasn't too bad, but like it wasn't as proper, I guess. I don't know.
No, but I mean, I don't know. I guess to me, I would have that. I don't know. I get maybe that's because I'm not a white person. I don't know. To me, I would have been like, yeah, sure. It's like self. I don't know. As a person, to have like some sort of decency to like, okay, you know what, this person had time to call me and wants to learn about this job and wants to join potentially the place that I'm working at. Let me try to get you an answer. I don't know. Um, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that happened. That happened to you. So when it comes to in school, there are so many different groups, so many different, I grew up cliques, so many different I don't know what you would call, like, there's many subgroups within the school. Like, for example, the popular kids would hang out over here, the rockers would hang out over there. Like, they have all these groups. How do you all like that double consciousness? Does that play a factor on who's in your circle, or who are your friends, or does that even matter? And I'll toss it. I'll go for it. Favorite.
Yeah. My like circle that I hang out with at school, I hang out with like the people who are most comfortable with me, I guess. Um, People who I can relate to the most. So in this case, that's black people. Um, but yeah, like the code switching thing. The thing is that the people I hang out with, um, they're like the most they're like the most comfortable to me, so that I don't have to switch as much because if I say had a choice, I guess I would hang out with people I could relate to even more, which are Nigerians. I can count the amount of Nigerians that are at East on one hand, so that's not necessarily possible. So when I'm around African Americans, period, I can relate to them a little bit more than I could anybody else, if you know what I mean. So like the switching, it I don't have to switch as much. I do have to switch a little bit, but it's not as much as hanging around white people where I have to like completely change my personality. I don't have to change it that much to be able to fit in.
Okay. And Juliette, what about yourself?
Um, I hang out and talk to most of the same people, and those people like I don't have to switch unless I want to or I'm like trying to. I don't switch when I'm talking to them. Only time I will switch is unless like I'm not thinking about it and I just kind of do it just and yeah, I don't know. But I don't think I've actually ever switched when I'm talking around my friends because most of them are black or people of color. Like Favor said, that can relate to me. So um I don't necessarily have to. Um it's a little different because when I would hang out with a few of my white friends, sometimes I would switch, and then other times I just would kind of do like a mix between the both, like between talking like how I normally would talk, and then like my artificial voice in quotes, I guess, because I don't know. I feel I feel more comfortable doing that sometimes because I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah.
That's all right. Thank you. Um, so one of the, when we're talking about the double consciousness and like you all said it, like we feel comfortable, within our own groups, and sometimes even with like other folks of color. Like if you have a good relationship, it's like, all right, cool. We're gonna be chilling and we're just having a good time. We can say any like like we feel comfortable just like we can have a conversation. But sometimes it's like when specifically here, like when white folks come into the room, it's like, oh, we gotta tone it down. It's like we don't know how you're going to react. Like we don't know if what you're going to say is going to offend you, and that sometimes can also be, it's not because we don't want to invite white folks in, or at least personally, it's because it's more of like we don't know if how are you going to relate, because the thing is, like, here's the thing: white folks have never they can go their entire lives without having to traverse into another bubble. Like white folks have that privilege where it's like if you could, for example, here's a quote that I got from a student that's saying that I was their first teacher of color ever. And to me, I'm like, wow, geez, like it's 2021 now. And it's like, I am your first teacher of color and you are already in high school. That's like what, you're ninth grade, you're what, 14, 15? And to me, I'm like to me, that's just like, wow. It's just, and then and then you can even see that too because of the way they speak or the way they try to like say certain things. And even when I have to speak to students who've never had a teacher of color, it's like sometimes I feel like I have to even. It sounds weird, like, but I have a student who was just like, "Hold up, if you were my kid and you spoke to me like that, heck no." You know what I'm saying? So it's like one of those things. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, do they talk like that? Would they talk like that to their white teachers? But um, let me ask you all that. Have you all ever had other teachers of color, or how many teachers of colors have you had in you know, your educational career? Let's see, Julie or Favor, go for it.
Yeah. I had a substitute teacher that was black in middle school, like one time, and that was it until high school when I was in Mr. Martinez's class. Mr. Martinez is my first teacher of color, like full time for 3 years now. And he knows when I first got into Avid, like I barely talked or anything like that because the experience with all these other people, you can't really say too much. You can't really go out of your way too much. So after a while in his class, I started to open up because the environment in there was welcoming, and it was like a family, and you can quite literally, like in Mr. Martinez's class, you can say whatever. You're not going to get judged. You're not going to get labeled. A lot of the time at school, you got to tone it down so that you're not labeled as, the loud black girl. But in Mr. Martinez's class, whew, I mean, I've said some outrageous things in there on accident, but people don't go like, "Oh, you're weird," or like, it's like a discussion moment. It's a time for you to build your confidence and to figure out who you really are. And I feel like teachers who look like you, they do that the best. Because I wasn't really a very open or a bold person until I got to high school, and I don't think that I would have that would have happened if I wasn't an avid.
Thank you. What about you, Juliette?
I completely agree with Favor because we went to the same middle school and there was no black teacher. Like the only teacher that I could actually count as a black teacher, quote unquote, was Mr. Jones. But that's because he would come into the classroom like maybe if he needed to sub in because the teacher needed to go to the bathroom or something. But like that was he wasn't like an actual teacher. So when I did get to East, like and Farrah was talking about Avid, so I went into the classroom with her and then like yeah, I just felt like way more comfortable in the room just because like it had a nice atmosphere, I was there with Favor, of course, I already knew her. And then like, I saw Precious and all these other people. And then, in Miss Martinez's class, you really could say anything. Like you could talk about whatever. And actually actually being in one of his classes, like it definitely was like I felt really comfortable because like even in the Zoom, I could still sometimes say whatever. Other times we like the topic was a little not okay for the Zoom, so then I had to calm down. But like still, you feel more comfortable with people who look like you or go through the same thing as you and basically can understand you more than other people.
And vice versa, the other way around. As a teacher, teaching students of color, teaching folks that look like me, it's like I feel more comfortable when I'm putting the curriculum together. I'm like, all right, this is what we could talk about. And I've been in situations, sadly, because segregation's still in our schools, and then even me, like in terms of like double consciousness and teaching, a lot of my honors classes were all mostly white students. So like the what I would teach, maybe the first hour and try to teach that to my honors class, sometimes it was like, it's like it didn't go too well. But having both of you in the class and like the conversation, it feels like you're just having a conversation with like a family member, and it doesn't even feel like school. So one, thank you all. Like it's been amazing to have y'all, both of you in class. Just because like folks don't get to hear you all, like how I've heard you, but you all have not only grown, but like just the knowledge that you all have and the experience. This is what, at least for me, what wakes me up, and it's like it reminds me of the importance of having a person of color in the classroom as a teacher, but also as students. Because when we're talking about the double consciousness, I'm going to show you all. I'm going to skip this video, but check this out. In 2017 and 18, the Ed Week came out with an article uh, that said 79.3% of public school teachers are white, 9.3 are Hispanic Latino, 7% are Black, and 2% are Asian. So when I'm looking at those numbers, I also think about the students that come into our classes, especially like at East High School. A lot of the students are students of color, and I'm also thinking like, man, when they're in my classroom, and I get this all the time, it's like, oh, why is this student, doing so well in your classroom, but they're struggling in mine? And I'm like, I'm just teaching. I just do what I do. I don't know what you all do. But then like, I start to think, how do you tell a white teacher? It's like, oh, it's because you're white. And, it's like, I don't know. That's just like, for me, like looking at these numbers, and I'm like, and then looking at the other topics that we talked about, everything connected, the curriculum is always Eurocentric. It's always about white folks. And when we're talking about the history of Latinos or Black folks, it's always from a deficit mindset. It's always like from slavery. It's always from like racism. It's never from a root of empowerment. So to me, like double consciousness is also applies when like a student, even when they're coming into your classroom and you're white and you tell them to sit down, raise your hand, um, you know, that kind of that can also hinder uh, education or hinder learning. But what do you have y'all? Do these numbers surprise any of you? Favor Juliette?
No. Um, elementary school, middle school, high school, white teachers. I barely. I can count the amount of black teachers that I've had, or like people of color as teachers in all three like schools that I've been to. I can count how many teachers of color that I've had, like, or that I've seen walking around the building, and that like includes behavioral staff. So yeah, I that doesn't surprise me at all.
And the data, I'm gonna ask this to Juliette because the data suggests that even if we start increasing more teachers of color, there's also an issue in terms of retention or having teachers of color staying in those jobs. And a lot of the times, the reason why teachers leave is because they feel it's an unwelcoming place, or like the job is unwelcoming. There's like microaggressions. But Juliette, what do you think our school can do to keep or retain or even attract more teachers of color?
Um, Hearing what some of these teachers have like said to students that are like people of color at East, um, I'll be honest. If we want teachers to stay, we gotta do something about them. And they know what they say most of the time. If they're trying to come off a certain way, then they know what they're doing. So you have to actually get those teachers in check, because half these teachers are not gonna put up with one of their coworkers saying this and that behind their back every day or constantly to them. Like nobody wants to hear that. Even as a student, you don't want to hear the same person talking about you behind your back 24/7. So you kind of have to do something about those teachers or those people in East community to like actually do something about that. And in other schools where it's like heavily, I'm gonna use Texas as like a base, I guess. Like let's take Texas. Half them teachers are probably some little bit racist, or maybe they are fully racist. I'm not saying fully, like, I'm sorry, like I'm not. There's at least like the good percentage of racist teachers. A black teacher would not want to work there because they already know what's going to happen, what it's going to sound like, what it's going to be like. It has to be a positive space for those teachers to actually be welcomed into and feel comfortable, just like a classroom.
And then Favor, what about yourself? Like what can East be doing to recruit or retain teachers of color?
I honestly don't know. If they don't like want to go the route of firing teachers that are, that they say outrageous things and they like spew microaggressions in every sentence, then I really don't know. If you like, you're gonna have to remove the problem. It's like if you have mold, you can't just leave it there. You gotta clean it up, cut it out, before it spreads. It's not just gonna leave on its own. It's not just gonna, disappear. And just like Juliet said, when you have people like talking about you, or not even talking directly to you, but you know that it's about you, you're not gonna want to sit in that environment. There's this one teacher that we had last year. I'm not gonna name names, but she came in our classroom talking all types of crazy. I mean, she told one of my classmates that he doesn't look like he belonged here. And she was pronouncing names wrong on purpose even after multiple corrections. So those types of people, when they're there and you got a black teacher there or a person of color, they'll probably, deal with it for a while, as we have been taught to do. But then they're gonna be like, I get paid to do this. I'm not gonna sit around here and like waste my life being treated like nothing just because I want to teach some kids. They'll go somewhere else or they'll pick another profession.
I, I 100% as a teacher of color, I 100% agree. I mean, I can go deep, but into it, but I don't like talking smack about my current employer or my previous employer. But it's one of those things where, like, one example, I had somebody come in and as a, being the teacher, they come up to me and then they're like, oh, instead of asking me, like, it was a history class, and it's like, oh, are you the Spanish teacher? And then I was like, no, I'm a history teacher. Oh, is this the dual language? And like, for her, in her mindset, she had already assumed that I was like Spanish. She was like, oh, she was like, I teach Spanish. And then I'm like, no, I'm the history teacher. And then even after I said that, she was like, oh, so you're the dual language, the one that teaches like history both in English and Spanish. I'm like, no, I'm just the history teacher here. Like, that's a whole different teacher. And then, like, for me to try to have the discussion and break that down at that moment when teachers are coming in, I'm like, I just got to let it go and just continue on. But these are the types of like microaggressions that make you just want to, like, really, why do I want to work here? And also, even another thing that had happened to me was 3 years ago when I had a student in my classroom. She was actually pretty amazing. She was like, she would come to my class and do work, but she wouldn't go to any of her other classes, and people would tell me, like, why is this she's passing your class? And like, there was even talks about um folks that I was like an easy grader, and there was folks that like even were looking into my grade book, and I'm like, whoa, hold up, like, where is
That's
the
disgusting.
it definitely, I had this, with my students, like, y'all know, like, I put it all on the table because I was brought in, and then I was like, yo, this is what's happening, and I told her, like, this is, and then, yeah, it's like these microaggressions that exist in the workforce is just kind of it wears you down, it's draining. And then at the same time, those same folks come back, you know a year later or whatnot, and they're like, oh, teach us what you're going to do in the classroom so we can have student engagement, like, we want to learn from you. It's like, after you first criticized, we're trying to like knock you down. But
Yeah, it's like they look to everybody else as a source of the problem instead of looking at themselves. Like, it's so crazy to me. Like, they'll be like, maybe that's the problem. Maybe this is the problem. But have you ever thought that you are the problem? Like, I don't get it. Like, they're like, maybe they just don't care enough. I'm like, maybe you say terrible things to them and they don't feel comfortable in your class. I and especially at East, I feel like they they don't like to directly confront the problem until it's like too late and until like a lot of people are like looking at them to confront the problem. If there's an issue, then like you need to handle it immediately. You can't just leave it alone and be like, well, maybe no, well, maybe nothing. The specific teacher that you're talking about that like assumed that you taught a Spanish class, she was at Black Hawk literally 2 years before. She did basically the same thing. The day after, she was a substitute teacher for your class. She was a substitute teacher in my AP seminar class. She basically did the same thing. And I'm like, why do they keep hiring teachers like this? Like, do they not see any complaints? But after like multiple offenses, they'll be like, maybe the teacher was the problem. And it's the weirdest thing to me.
I agree. And then like, this is something by you saying that, it reminded me of a story that came out. I think it was like a couple weeks ago. I forgot what school, but I think it was in the East Coast, of a teacher who was finally, after years of letting, I can look it up now, but apparently, like, she would bully her students. I don't know if y'all heard about this story, that like she would even shove her students. And this lady even pulled up a picture, a mugshot of a young student in her classroom, and showed it to the whole class, and was like, oh, is this your mom? Like, showing a mugshot. Like,
Isn't that some type of invasion of privacy or something? Lord.
Yeah, I don't know about invasion of privacy, but like it's one of those things where it's like, wow, like, and this woman was still it wasn't until somebody finally complained, until like a mom complained, that they actually removed that teacher. But, and then the other thing that it's very common that that I've noticed even in our school is when other teachers, they expose your grades in front of the whole class. They're like, oh well, that's why you're failing, or that's why you're doing this. It's like, yeah, don't do that. That's going to make it even that's going to makes it an unwelcoming environment for students. And if I try not to do it, I say I try not to, because sometimes it does slip up when you're like, you want to talk to a student about grades. It's like, dude, if you don't turn this assignment, you're failing. And then like obviously people hear and whatnot. But these are the type of microaggressions when we talk about consciousness, the double consciousness, that students have to navigate. It's like, they have to try to find their safe spaces in order to navigate these toxic teachers. There's also here's a story that I had ready for y'all, and I'm going to read it to y'all. Y'all tell me what y'all think. But in Long Island, there was a Catholic teacher that basically, so the premise of the story, there was this black kid who had just finished his English assignment and actually moved on and was working on another assignment, like trying to get ahead. And then essentially like his teacher, not understanding, like, or not even seeing, not even taking time to look at what the student was doing, just grabs the paper, grabs his assignment, rips it up, and sends him to the headmaster. It's a Catholic school. And essentially, when he gets to the principal's office or the headmaster's office, the the headmaster tells the young man to apologize like the African way, to apologize in the African way, and then
Ah,
yeah, which was to
What?
get on his knees. So basically, they made this little boy who was about 8, 9 to get on his knees and apologize. And then the kid went and told his mom, and he was now starting to act like the kid was traumatized by this event and didn't want to go to school, and now has to go through therapy. And then the mom went and asked the school, like, did this happen? And then this is what the headmaster said. He said that, like, that he had learned this from a Nigerian father, that this was the way that you apologize uh, in Nigerian
oh
culture.
my
Oh,
god.
Lord.
Yo, okay. Every time I hear stories about white people like this,
Why do they blame it on other people? They
I
can't take
can't. Okay,
accountability.
the fact that he said African way is already beyond disrespectful already, like
Yup.
at in itself, because Africa is the most culturally diverse continent on this planet. And then going to say that like he learned that from a Nigerian man, I'm telling you right now, that that Nigerian man is Yoruba. Other cultures don't do that. Other tribes in Nigeria don't do that. That is one tribe. And like, oh, I am like heated. I'm heated
Yeah,
right now.
I
First
sent
of
you.
all,
Yeah, I
Yup.
sent you all the.
like,
I sent you all the article to read it. Go for it. My bad.
you don't take people's culture and then you twist it around. I am certain that that's not exactly what that father told him to do, or like taught him how to do. Kneeling down is for girls, and boys, they do like a completely different thing, and that's not even for apologizing, it's for greetings. So you're not gonna tell me right now that they told a black boy, is this black boy Nigerian? Does this specific tradition of yours come from a tribe that he's from? Or did you just see a black boy that did something wrong, that didn't do anything wrong in the first place, and made him do something that he wasn't supposed to do, and forced him to kneel down to his teacher? Like, that's what I don't get. Not only is that like beyond disrespectful,
That's
but
bad.
They see giving respect to people the equivalent of treating them so far above yourself. Respecting people doesn't mean treating them as an authority. Respecting people means treating them as a human. So if he don't respect you, you don't respect him. To teachers, that means if you don't treat me like an authority, I'm going to treat you less than a person. They really need to stop.
That's so like that's so that I've heard people like saying like, oh my god, that's so bizarre. Like how there's no way for one for somebody to tell you that, like that could have been like a whole story time. He could have been, oh my dad, this and this and this. That's his life. How are you, a white person who knows nothing about this culture, nothing about that place, nothing about that area, take it upon yourself to feel that what that man said to you was correct in your favor to do? That's so weird. Like that's degrading in some type of way. Like how you going to change that up to that's like telling that's like giving that kid a whooping. And I don't even know. Like that's so weird to me.
Yeah, and
Cause
he still try to justify it. Like so,
no justification needed. You
I
messed up and you're
I
stupid.
I 100% agree. And like this is what his words. He said that in the article that I sent y'all. If I had said to him to apologize and get back to class, it would have meant nothing. It was changing the ways you say I apologize. And then the teacher tries to, or the headmaster tries to then sympathize and say, I have 6 kids and 4 boys, and if one of them is really acting rude and arrogant, I will say at times, get on your knees and apologize. And then he says, I was speaking to your son as I would my own son.
First of all, I feel bad for his kids.
Right.
Second of all, getting on your knees to apologize doesn't really mean anything. In our culture, getting on your knees to apologize is the same thing as just apologizing. It's just a different way. So if you don't really mean that apology, doing all that is doing too much. Also, I don't know if I missed something, but what did this boy do? Like, what exactly was his offense? What did he do wrong that caused all this?
So
He's
the
ooh, like on top of that, an 8-year old's not gonna sit there and apologize and not mean it. Like that's still a kid at the end of the day. They're gonna be like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He could have just said sorry, and that kid would have been sorry. He's not no adult,
Literally,
not no
saying
teenager.
I'm sorry is the same thing
Right?
as
That's
kneeling down and saying I'm sorry. It's
right.
just different cultures. I don't know what they think that they're doing, but oh my days.
That's like when
yeah
Catholic, like at some of them Catholic schools, they will take it upon themselves to beat them children. I've heard people doing that or punishing those children to like no reason. It will be kindergartners. There's one YouTuber, he went to a Catholic school. That teacher had a ruler, and what she would do is she'd have them kids stand in like a certain position. If they move, she'd slap them. You are not their parent. I don't care if you're some type of school to get them. I don't know what goes on in there, but if that's my kid, you won't put your hands on them. I don't care what you are. Those are little kids that sometimes get beat, who are given punishments for no reason. Those are little kids. They do not need to be, oh, kneel down. If you tell a little kid to say sorry, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say sorry. That's so weird.
yeah, and then so you asked like, what did he do? Like on the article, like all from what I was able to gather was that all he did wrong was try to finish homework for another class because he had finished his other assignment, and then the teacher had just noticed that he was working on something else and ripped the assignment up and sent him to the headmaster or the principal's office.
That's like what
Oh,
teachers
so
do.
he was being a
That's
student?
wild.
Yeah, so he was
He
being
was
a student.
he was being a student and that was wrong because Lord knows how many times I've done my TRF in first hour chemistry after I was done in my work because it was Tuesday or Thursday and I had Avid soon and I hadn't finished it. So he was doing homework for another class. It wasn't like he was in the middle of doing his work for that specific class and he did something else. He was done with his work. She would have got mad at him for just sitting there doing nothing. and then he decided to be productive and take initiative and complete work for another class, and suddenly that's doing something wrong. See, that's racist.
See,
I don't want to hear anything else. That's racist.
they be taking them kids binders when they try to work on something. Like that's a problem. Like no, if they finish their work and they're done with that, that gives them all right to do whatever. I mean, if they're doing something productive, then why are you mad? That simply is racist. You're racist. Cause what? Let a little what? Let Cindy do that. Cindy gonna get looked at like, oh,
He's
good
gonna
job.
give her a good gold star. I'm a good job,
Right,
Cindy.
exactly.
And this
What?
goes, yeah, this goes back again to that double conscious, that double standard. It's like, it's always for people of color. It's like we're always held at a different standard. Like and not in a good way, in a negative way. It's like you have to be doing this. You have to be. But if it was like you said, if it was somebody else, oh, hardworking student, look at that, like always doing something. And excuse me, and there's even also like research that shows that like the people that are punished or even surveilled the most in classrooms specifically are Black female students. But most of the like it's also students of color. So for folks who are listening and for white teachers specifically, it's like when we talk about this double consciousness, you all have that luxury of you get to wake up white, live in your white little bubbles, and you have the luxury of not even coming into our spaces, get to know our culture. So you never understand like what you're doing is harmful. Like especially that incident, that's harmful. I have other ones that I've heard too. I've even seen it. I've witnessed it where I was covering. It was me and another teacher. We were co-teaching a class, and there was a couple of students who were speaking Spanish, and then she ends up telling them like no, so we said like use your English. So she was like, use your English, don't use your Spanish. I'm like, why? Let them speak that the Spanish. And I felt kind of bad too, as like as a person who speaks Spanish. I'm like, okay, I guess I won't be speaking Spanish in the classroom either. But these are just some of the things that teachers need to be aware of. And also like another incident that happened, which I think y'all heard of. Did y'all hear about Sun Prairie, the incident with the question that they asked of like, how would you punish your slave? I don't know if y'all heard that.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I saw it. I just scrolled. I can't. My mental health can't take that.
It's every day. Another thing with that, relating to that too, why did they think black people got to be saviors for everything? They'd be Black Twitter gonna save this. No, we not. No, I am not. I'm sitting down. I'm not doing this. That's another thing. Black people always got to be in something. I like that. That's so weird. Like what? Why black people got to deal with that? Why? And also, how would you discipline your slaves? That's probably what that white person was thinking. He was like,
What possesses you to ask that question? Like it has to be possession. What possesses you to think about that, write it down, and pose it as an assignment to your students in
right,
2021? This is not 1776
we are
where
past.
slavery is running rampant. I mean, this is 2021. What makes you think that
Right.
that is okay to be like, if you had slaves, how
How
would you discipline them?
what?
I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd to even think. I don't believe that a mentally okay person, somebody who has common sense, would actually ask that question in this day and age.
You have to be like off something actually. That's like me. That's favorite. That's like me asking you, hmm, how do you want to degrade our fellow black people today? What?
Or if you were a slave, would you run away or would you stay?
Right. Would you go with Harriet Tubman or would you just stay and get with like what? What is wrong with you? There's actual mental issues. You're going to the psych ward, as Dr. Phil says, you're going to the ranch because there's something wrong. How are you gonna what?
All right, well, man, if y'all think that, then y'all are not gonna like this one. Let me send you, because I spent a lot of time reading. It gets worse. This one is from North Carolina. Guess what they did? They
I
made the
believe you
student
did.
the link that I just
What
sent you. Yep,
is
and it's an elementary school.
what?
So for the folks that are listening, so I shared an article with Favor and Juliette. So essentially, in North Carolina, the Board of Education had to apologize after a North Carolina elementary school teacher made her class play a escaping slavery game, and essentially, it's an online game where you basically because I clicked on the article and I checked it out, and it's you have to basically like get a certain number of slaves on the boat, and then
Whoa.
like yeah, it was just crazy. Um, and it's for fourth grade students, and it's yeah, and they got to
Uh,
play it over and over, and essentially, it's like it's through that I,
yeah, no,
I'm just speechless.
when I was in fourth grade, our teachers actually like taught us about the Underground Railroad. They didn't have us playing
They didn't have us
games
playing
about escaping slavery.
right. They didn't have
I
us playing whatever. Why? Wow.
Yeah, no, it's beyond disgusting, and this is why like I honestly don't think that I'm supposed to be saying this, especially at my age. But the things that I've witnessed in the short time that I've been alive, it makes me say, I am so tired. Like, I am so tired. I told my parents the other day, I was like, when I grow up, I'm just gonna like go live on an abandoned island and just like be. I can't imagine like growing up and being a black woman in America and facing discrimination at work and facing discrimination in the healthcare system and having my kids grow up in the education system that I grew up in and having all these people just talk all types of crazy and spew all different types of ideas. I am already so tired of it, and I'm only 17 years old. Like, I can't imagine continuing to live in a world where people say and do these kinds of things. I honestly can't. And that's like kind of sad because, our civil rights leaders, they didn't do all that for me to be tired already, but whoo, I'm tired. I am tired.
No, I agree. I mean, same here. Like when I read these articles, sometimes like, man, I just got to stop reading. I gotta this can't be true. It's like we're in like 2021, and even some of the stories that I hear, like some of the stuff that happened in 2019, like that I read, I'm like come on. Like there's another story that I didn't that I could have pulled up that I could send you all, but a teacher asked her students to give a price to their slave. Like what they basically had to they got they got pictures or whatnot, and they had to give a price of like how much they would pay for that person. And then in my head, I'm like, where where in your lesson planning do you're like, oh, this is gonna be fun, or like this is gonna be cool, like or this is gonna be engaging and this is gonna be educational. It's like nowhere, at least for me, nowhere in the right mind is like this to come to a class and just say put a price on a human being, specifically a black body. It's like and and you don't even think about what's that going to do to the students who are of black descent or who are African Americans. And that's just one. There's even one worse, that like a teacher separated her students from like slaves and people who are slave owners, and which the slave owners were actually had to go and inspect their classmates, so that then they would have to like give a price of whether they would buy them or not. So this is another separate incident. So stuff like that is still happening today, like 2019, 2021. It's just it's crazy.
With that thing, that's so. There's another thing. It was this. It was a TikTok actually, and it was like, it was an audio, and basically it was like, well, Sally grew up when these things were okay, Okay, Sally has been here for a good 40, 50 years. She knows that calling black people this and that and the third is not okay, but they still do it. These teachers know that it's not okay to be asking, what are you going to name your slave? What would you do to this and this to your slave? Because they know in no lesson plan does it say that. They, for you to be a teacher, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know that you can't teach anything and anything under the blue moon. But they will not check these teachers because most of them are white doing this, or maybe they're not. Maybe they are my color. Maybe they are black people doing all this and that. They still won't check. No, they're not going to check these teachers because most of them are probably whites. They will not check them because they don't care, but they'll go check other people who are not doing anything but teaching their students. Like, I don't understand that.
And also the sad part too, at least for the case with the headmaster making the student kneel, and this I have seen it where it does happen quite often, where it's like they're just paid, they don't get fired, they're on leave, on paid leave, and it's like, when something like this happens, it's like I don't think there's any. You just got to go. That's what I would do. Like, you're fired. It's like, this is unacceptable.
It's like, I don't understand. See, this is why I wouldn't want to be a teacher, because I couldn't handle it. Because the way things now, the way they are now, it's like things are like slid under the rug. Like, the teacher that made that kid clean up feces, I called the school. I called them, and the lady told me that it's a private investigation. There was nothing else about it. It is not a private investigation. Y'all don't care enough to actually do anything about it, though. You can tell she's had people calling her because she simply told me it was a private investigation trying to get me off the phone. And I told her that, I mean, obviously I'm not there, but I will pull my students, quote unquote, from that school because obviously y'all don't care. Now, if I was an actual parent, I would have already pulled my children from that school, because they're probably gonna put her on a paid leave and have somebody substitute in for her and not do anything about it. But that, and that's what they do most of the time. They'll have people, go on paid leave and then wait till it dies down and then bring them back in, or they'll have somebody else come back in and make it seem like they did something but they didn't. It's getting weird, it's getting creepy, and I'm tired of half these teachers doing whatever they want because they're teachers. You can't teach. This is why some of these kids come out the way they are, because sometimes it's not always at home with some of these students. It's not Sally and Connor at home, their parents doing this and that. It's the school they're going to. Miss Applegate is teaching these kids that, asking what you want to call your slave, and asking and separating these kids. They think it's okay. That's why they come out like that. That's why they say things like that. These teachers need to be held accountable for that. And it's like, I forgot what her name was, but she's been known for doing a test where she separates people by their eye color, and it's like, it's the blue eye brown eye test, and she basically, treats the people with the blue eyes, who are most of the time white, how, people with brown eyes feel, which it doesn't feel nice, of course. She treats them mean, she treats them bad, and they get upset, which is the whole main point. You're supposed to feel upset because so you can understand. Like, all the teachers need to go through that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I remember we watched that clip, and I had actually seen that clip when I was in college, and then you reminded me of it when you were in my ethnic studies class, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can't believe I missed this. And that is a great video, which now you reminded me that, like, oh, I actually should bring that up again in ethnic studies. But going back to, like, the thing, these actions that teachers do, it's I just want to make sure I put it out there that, like, teacher as a profession, when something like this happens, it's not just affecting you, the teacher that did it in your classroom, it's affecting the entire education system. Because when that student, when they get a new teacher, they move to the next grade or whatnot, they already are building, they don't have that trust. That trust is broken between the education system and that student who went through that traumatic event. So, and sometimes as teachers, like really good teachers, have to, like, bridge and try to, that harm that was created. When you're in my classroom, I have to understand, like, I'm a new teacher, I'm a different teacher, and I have to build that trust with that student. It's by listening to you, and then, and going above and beyond what any normal teacher does. So, for teachers who are thinking about doing this kind of stuff, I would say, even ask a coworker, or maybe even ask students, like, this is why it's important to bring your students into your lesson planning, to your curriculum planning, so you can get a set of eyes, especially if you're teaching about the history of folks that is not you. If you're white and teaching about the history of Black folks and the history of Latinos, Asians, like, why don't you consult folks from that demographic? Because they probably know more than what you do. And I want teachers to realize that, like, folks of color, learning does happen in school. Like, our parents sit us around and they teach us our culture. They teach us about our history. And it's not that we're not, like, I feel that I get, like, when I growing up, I felt that I was getting history both in school, and I was getting my cultural, my Latino history from home. But Juliette, what's up?
Dang, what was I gonna say? Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
my bad.
No, it's fine. I was listening and then I just kind of forgot what I was gonna say. Um, I feel like some of these schools, I feel like, don't actually do really good background checks on these teachers. Because now that I'm thinking about it, the teacher that Faber was talking about, she kept being a substitute for a while. But aside from that, me and Faber both had the same history teacher, and he has like a assistant teacher, and it's like he kept saying blacks and all that, and like he wasn't really confirming it with anybody. He just kind of, and I emailed him about it because, like, it was weird to hear that. It was uncomfortable, which he understood, thankfully. But like the videos that he had us watching, it was white people talking about blacks and this and that. It's just really weird and off-putting, because I know there's black people who talk about the same topic. I mean, maybe it's easier to find these people talking about it, but like, do at least more digging, and maybe before you teach something, or ask them, yeah, like you said, put your kids or students into the topic and ask them about it. It's way more helpful than trying to do it on your own and then sounding wrong and messing things up.
I agree. All right, man, we went a little bit over time, because this is a great conversation. And when we talk about double consciousness, we can go even deeper. I was also had some statistics about, in Hollywood and in the workforce, like, just like, it's all white, and we as folks of color, we have to change to fit those norms, and how we have to, like, change and talk about that. But specifically, I wanted to talk about education here, which I think we did. And I think we did an amazing job. And we can come back to this maybe in another segment. But before we close, I wanted to show this video, because I think this video is an amazing video that basically, and I'm only going to play the 2 minutes of it, that really captures what we try to cover here today. So this is the double consciousness.
Yo, what's going on, fam? It's your boy Joe, hitting you with another installment to the Chase Guide webisodes. Are you ready? Let's cut to the chase. Back in the day, a beautiful mind by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois came up with this concept, or at least coined the concept, double consciousness, which speaks to this idea of a Black American being very aware of the two worlds that he or she navigates through. There is high chance, very, very high chance, that if you are a Black person, particularly in America, you have learned to navigate between at least two worlds. We, by default, constantly go between two different contexts of majority Black culture and majority white culture. Many other minorities experience this as well. My specific experience is Black, obviously, so I'm speaking from that perspective. If you are Black, then you possibly were raised or go to a majority Black church, or you live in a majority Black community. You have majority Black friends even. But there is always the case where you have to spend significant time outside of that context. You work at a place that is majority white, or you go to school that is majority white, or you even go to a church that is majority white, or even black living in a majority white neighborhood. You have to learn to navigate between those two worlds. Consciously or subconsciously, many of us learn to behave and speak in ways depending on which context we're in. So it's not just workplace context. Everyone has that workplace sensibilities, but black people also have workplace and white sensibilities. So I may speak a certain way. My sense of humor is different. The way I behave, the way I navigate is different than how I would navigate in my majority black context where I live or where I go to church, so forth. Here's the issue. This is not an indictment. This is an observation. Please don't hear me in indicting you or insulting or coming at your head, basically. White people have a much higher chance. I'm not saying this happens to all white people, because obviously that's not the case. But they have a much higher chance of never having to spend significant time in a context outside of what majority white culture is. I'm not saying you have black friends. I'm saying specifically spending significant time in black friends' culture. It is very likely and often that it happens that white people can go almost their entire lives without having to spend significant time in someone else's context. It's a privilege that they have. And this could be by willful choice or just because of the choices that they're presented. They live in a all white neighborhood or grew up all white, or even there's some states and places that have a lot of white people. And so you don't even have the opportunity to spend outside of that context. I get it. And even when white people do go into the other context, they're white. They don't have like, this is my white culture sensibility, this is my black culture sensibility in the way that black people have. Yes, some of them attempt it and it's awkward, but it's never nearly as awkward for black people because we've been doing it since we can remember, going back and forth between these contexts.
So I just wanted to show that video because I think it encapsulates or it captures everything that we talked about today. And before we close, before I throw it over to Juliette and Favor for the last word, again, I just want to reiterate and throw it out there. If you are a teacher, at least from a perspective of a teacher, and I'll let Favor and Juliette speak on the perspective of a student. If you're a teacher, go outside of your comfort zone. Go into those communities, spend your significant, if you're going to be teaching about those communities. And the reason why I'm also saying this is in our school, next year, there's a new class that's going to be offered, U.S. history, African American history, and it's going to be taught by a white person. And again, I'm not saying that white folks can't teach black history. I didn't personally, because if we wanted to teach the class, you were supposed to like, let your department chair know. And I was like, I personally told myself I didn't feel comfortable. Because I was hoping that they were going to hire somebody that was black or African American. And that's why I didn't speak up. And also I already have Chicano Latino studies and I have ethnic studies, and to develop a new curriculum, it's just overwhelming for me. But for the folks who teach classes like that, and if you are white, get out of your comfort zone, go into those communities, speak to those communities, surround yourself with that community you're going to be teaching, so that students, when you speak to them, when you're teaching them, that it feels, that it sounds genuine. So that's my tip of advice. And one thing before I forget, big shout out to my home state of California. Just a couple of days ago, they passed a law that ethnic studies is going to be taught in all, California school districts. So big shout out. I wish that, I guess Madison, Wisconsin, it's moving into that direction too, but ethnic studies and, things that we talked about today, incidents that happen all America. This is the reason why we need ethnic studies. This is the reason why we need Chicano Latino studies. This is the reason why we need African American studies, Asian American studies, because these communities, our communities, face these type of incidences, and we are the ones that are left to deal with the trauma. And not only that, some of the kids are just in middle school, high school, and then you want us to go to college and face these, with these traumatic events. Again, If you really want black and brown excellence, if you really want us to achieve our potential, give us our spaces. Give us our spaces where we feel comfortable and where we can be ourselves and we don't have to code switch all the time because it's draining, it's tiring. And then you get home and you got work to do. And after you've had to deal with all those experiences, does that really motivate you to do all that work, to do that homework assignment for that teacher that mistreated you? My answer would be no. But last words, Juliette, what are the last words from you?
Um, I just have one thing to say. If you wait, hold on. I have something to say, and y'all might not like it, but it needs to be said. If you're a white teacher, please use that to your just use that to your benefit, and please help these kids. Like if you know there's something going on, like if a black student comes up to you and they're saying one of these teachers doing this and that, take that as your initiative because you have way more say in some things, and you know you do because you're white in this community. So take that, go help them kids. Don't be racist, because if I find out that you're being racist, I will have a problem with you, and I will pull my quote unquote students from your curriculum, from the class. So don't have me call you and find you. But be respectful, treat your students well. If you learned something, I mean, hopefully you did, which you should have if you were listening. So yeah, I don't know.
Thank you, Julia. Favor, what are your last words?
Um, treat your students with respect. Don't overdo what you're supposed to be doing. Um, Personally, I'm gonna be taking the African American Studies class next year, and I'm very scared because I've already had like a negative experience with a history teacher teaching African history, a white person teaching African history, telling us about our culture and tribes and stuff. So do your research. Like, don't just come in here and say like all the old things that we've heard. I hope somebody sends this to the new African American Studies teacher for next year. If I hear anything about Martin Luther King Jr. that I've heard before, I'm dropping that class.
At the quickest of speeds.
Simple.
Send this to the teacher who keeps teaching these dance classes at East as well. Please send this to her. I don't know her name. I don't know who she is. You know what I'm talking about. Please send this to her. She needs to be stopped. Like,
We
nah.
don't want to dance to Cotton Eye Joe.
That's like dancing a wade in the water.
We
Please
don't want to do
wade
that.
What?
Hold up. We're gonna speak about this off air. I need what the what?
Please.
Oh my god, I forgot to tell you about that.
Lord. We gonna dance a wade in the water when the thing close out.
No, what? I am. Oh man, we ran out of time. I gotta. Oh, hold on. Let me make these quick announcements. Because we'll talk next week. It's spring break, so I won't be on. I'll be out. But actually, if Favor and Julia, if y'all want to take over and do the show, we can take it over and I can show you all how to do it. But
Yes,
at least
sir.
I was planning
Okay.
to take a break. So y'all stay tuned. It might just be Favor and Julia, and plus I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing my voice and would love to hear y'all instead. Actually, yeah, I've heard the comments, the positive feedback is that they actually love y'all. So I would love that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Y'all so nice.
the other thing too, so the reason why now I can go over on the show like with more than an hour is because I paid to the server so I can like host longer than an hour. So if y'all please consider, the listeners, please consider donating to Venmo so help alleviate the cost, and also any of the money that I get from donations, I use it for the classroom. So those are my announcements, my last words. And before we head out, I'm gonna leave y'all with the song that I was playing in the beginning by Raquel Bustamante, paying an homenaje and homage to Selena Quintanilla. Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in,
por el Jente y
and we'll see you next time. Take care.